But if it starts inciting hatred and violence, that is not what we would call, as a mature democracy, freedom of speech. So in Canada, these anti-Indian forces, largely grouped as forces which were secessionist, wanted to create a land, a country within India. And that is something which was being done by foreign citizens. They were not even Indian citizens. Intelligence could be many things. What it is not is the evidence. And unfortunately, whatever alleged information or intelligence Canadians had at that point of time, they were not evidence. And still they went ahead and issued a statement in the parliament through the prime minister at that point of time, which could have been avoided. Now, and when you look at trade in goods, Canada could be a great source for India for its energy security, but also for its food security. If you look at energy security, Canada had been over-dependent on the US as the market, and therefore it could not develop the kinds of infrastructure for the export of its energy, which is largely the crude oil and LNG. I'm not talking about the uranium at this point of time. The Canadian side does not have the infrastructure to export LNG at the scale which India needs. So my way of looking at trade agreements is that trade agreements should increase economic activities. Right. Exports is just a part of one of the economic activities. Just think of it. If Hong Kong was only looking at increasing trade in goods with the world, it would have never become what it is today.
Right.
If Singapore would have done the same, it would have never become what it is today in the world. If you look at the present Prime Minister in Canada, he had been a banker for larger part of his life. He had been an economic consultant for the larger part of his life. So therefore, he is a bridge builder. So is Prime Minister Modi. He also very much likes to build bridges. So if you look at these two personalities at the helms of the affairs at the moment, I'm sure that more bridges will be built, including in investment.
Hi, welcome to Podcast with Pratim. I have with me Ambassador Sanjay Kumar Verma. Ambassador Verma had come to the news back in 2023 when the then Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau described the Indian High Commissioner and other diplomats as persons of interest in Hardeep Singh Nijjar killing. India recalled the diplomatic staff most big time. There was tit for tat on either side. The bilateral relations suffered. Thankfully, the trade and investment did not suffer. Canadian pension funds are a big time investor in India. That continued. And recently, Prime Minister Mark Carney visited India apparently and visibly with an aim to reset ties. So that takes me to the first question, sir. How did and what are the changes that you see in India-Canada relations from Trudeau to Carney in both trade and security front? Both are very crucial to us. Over to you, sir.
First of all, namaskar to you and through you, your viewers. Canada had been a very important pillar of India's foreign relations. Somehow we had seen it sliding in the negative direction over past few decades. So what I'm going to talk about is nothing new. So let me start with the security aspect first. Any modern state in the world would certainly try to protect its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And it is not only the hard power or the military which will be required to take care of the territorial integrity, but the sovereignty and territorial integrity are also safeguarded by its diplomats posted all over the world. Our job is to first try and identify those fabrics, those strands which might lead to a derogation in the sovereignty of the nation we represent. So, with this background, now let me take you to Canada. In Canada, unfortunately, there had been a political environment which allowed anti India forces to not only voice their opinion, but also to perpetrate hate, hatred, violence, and challenge to India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, these are red lines. And these red lines, I don't think any country would like to see in its bilateral relation with any other country. So, this situation was there, as I said earlier, for a few decades. When I was assigned as India's High Commissioner to Canada and joined Ottawa way back in October or 1st of November, in fact, 2022, I heard these voices clearly. I heard the voices and the implications for India. And my first reaction to that was that freedom of speech is one side, but if it starts inciting hatred and violence, that is not what we would call, as a mature democracy, freedom of speech. So in Canada, these anti-Indian forces, largely grouped as forces which were secessionist, wanted to create a land, a country within India. And that is something which was being done by foreign citizens. They were not even Indian citizens. Indian citizens have all the rights to voice their political opinion. But these were the bunch of Canadian citizens who were given kind of an encouragement by the political system existing in Canada at that point of time. So they started spreading hatred, not only against India, not only against its leadership. I was, of course, a target because I represented both the country and the leadership, but also against other people, other migrants from India, whether they were Canadian citizens or they were still Indian citizens as non-resident Indians in Canada. This was pushing the envelope to a larger front. And that is where I said, enough is enough. And let's now start discussing security.
If I'm not wrong, there was an incident where they had put up a statue of Beyonce Singh and garlanded on the day of Indira Gandhi's death anniversary. That was probably at your time.
Yeah. So, Pratim, what happened at that time was that, on the occasion of very pious festival, Baisakhi, worldwide, there is a tradition of bringing in Nagar Kirtan, which is nothing but the procession of tableau, procession of people chanting praise for gurus, who were our revered gurus as well. So in that, there was a tableau in which our former Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, was shown as an effigy. And the two shooters were there who were spraying bullets. Again, this was all symbolic, spraying bullets on her, blood oozing out of her body. This was such a bad depiction, a depiction which was filled of hatred, promoting violence, that any decent democracy would have said, take it out. Unfortunately, that did not happen.
I'm sure viewers are aware about the Kanishka air crash, which the plane took off from Canada and then it blew midair, and too many Canadian citizens died, and it was Khalistani terrorists who did that. So we had a long pending issue with Canada on the limits of liberation, if I may put it so. Sir, on security front, the Five Eyes coalition has not been very kind to us, particularly at that period, if I remember. Well, the US-Canada duet has been the most concerning. Now that US and Canada are not at the best of their relations, so is there any change in the way these Five Eyes had been, the whole approach to India?
Uh, I would go to the Five Eyes because they are different countries and they have different synergies with India. They have a different content of their bilateral relationship with India. But let me stay with Canada at the point of time. Now, if you look at Canada, they, the world over, if you look at the intelligence agencies, they do share intelligence.
Right.
But intelligence is not evidence. Intelligence could be hearsay. Intelligence could be something which other stakeholders want to use as propaganda. Intelligence could be something which they are targeting according to a policy against a country. So intelligence could be many things. What it is not is the evidence. And unfortunately, whatever alleged information or intelligence Canadians had at that point of time, they were not evidence, and still they went ahead and issued a statement in the parliament through the prime minister at that point of time, which could have been avoided. Now, on the US-Canada relations, yes, the relationship is at a stream, and the main reason is not what is happening today, but the main reason is the over-dependence of Canada on the US.
Right.
And whenever there is someone who is over-dependent, it's very easy to rock the boat. I can just pull out one bamboo and the entire boat just collapses. And that is what was happening. That is what you see today. And these are all national interests. So I'm not saying who is wrong, who is right. US has to follow its own national interest. Canada has to follow its own national interest. And we, for ourselves, would follow strategic autonomy with our own national interests. So therefore, wherever the national interests collide, diverge, that is the point of friction. Wherever they converge, that is the point of moving ahead. So with India, Canada has got many points, rather most of the points where convergences are there. And there could be a few friction points, and that's fine. Any two mature democracies should be able to sit across the table and discuss such frictions and find a way forward. So Five Eyes, I will not see it as something which is targeted against India. We have excellent relationship with all the Five Eye countries, and they had been in communication with our own intelligence services for over a long period of time.
Thanks, sir. You rightly said that the Canada was over-dependent on the US. If I'm not wrong, at least 80% of the trade was directed to the US. Mexico, another country, which is over-dependent. So they were basically US satellites, kind of. So now that fabric or the kind of situation that they have created is under pressure, does it hold any prospect for the India-Canada trade? I'm talking about the upside. The trade is too small for Canada, which is a source of world's most of the raw materials. The India is one of the largest top buyers of raw materials, particularly energy. So the bilateral trade is too small at $9 billion or so. Over to you, sir.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you that there is a huge headroom available for India and Canada to upscale its bilateral trade. Now, when I talk of trade, I don't only talk of trade in goods. I would also include trade in services. And when you combine the two, then you have a sizable volume, is still not commensurate with what the two countries can do. So let's divide it into a few compartments. Let's start with the trade in goods. And when you look at trade in goods, Canada could be a great source for India for its energy security, but also for its food security. If you look at energy security, Canada had been over-dependent on the US as the market, and therefore it could not develop the kinds of infrastructure for the export of its energy, which is largely the crude oil and LNG. I'm not talking about the uranium at this point of time, which is more or less a political commodity.
Right.
So if you look at these two energies, Canada did not have the kind of ports that it should have to export them. Canada did not have the kinds of tankers that it must own, super tankers to export them. And the distance between Canada and India was not kinder to the bilateral trade in energy because it was not that cost effective for the logistics. If you look at uranium as another source of energy, Canada had supplied uranium to India earlier. In fact, Canada was the first country to give a nuclear reactor to India way back in 1970s. So therefore, we had been doing a lot of trade between the two of us. Let me take you, Pritanda, to trade in services. If you look at trade in services, Canada had been a source of consultancy in India.
Right.
India has been a source of students to Canada. All these are services.
Right.
And all these are trades. So trade in
fact,
services.
Indian students are a major source of revenue for Canadian universities.
They used to be. They used to be in the recent past. If you go 2 decades back, they were not. But since the Canadian government changed its policy on recruitment of students to the Canadian universities, somewhere in the mid of 2010s, 15, 16, around that time, and thereafter we found that more Indian students were able to find their way to Canada. It was largely to do with their own domestic reforms in the education system, which allowed many more universities to recruit foreign students, which gave rise to a large number of Indian students in Canada.
Right. Sir, you spoke about LNG, and now we know that we had been sourcing it from the Mid East for a reason. You also have you told about it when you said the distance between the two countries, India and Canada. So we have been sourcing it at very cheap cost, transport cost I'm talking about, from the Middle East, Qatar, and etc. But the recent war in Middle East have exposed the vulnerability of the plan. So as it happens, we now have to move higher, the value chain. We have to afford a costlier LNG also, and like crude, which we are sourcing for 40 countries. So we have to expand, diversify our basket. Now that's the writing on the wall. So is there anything that you expect on LNG front between India and Canada too soon?
From a commercial analysis point of view, trade analysis point of view, this should have happened long back. But the main issue, as I earlier pointed out, is the infrastructure on the Canadian side. The Canadian side does not have the infrastructure to export LNG at the scale which India needs. And therefore, I won't see any increase in diversification of LNG towards Canada as far as India is concerned in coming years and months.
Okay. That's interesting. So that also means that we have to survive with the LNG issues for now and our dependence on Middle East. Sir, India-Canada Trade Pact has been awaited for last 15 years. It is one of those issues which are almost like never resolved. You have recently written about an article in Observer Research Foundation website where you you said that we need a practical pact rather than a perfect pact. Now, may I assume that the bar was actually directed to our Commerce Ministry, because as a journalist and as a trade researcher, so I am aware of how the Indian bureaucracy, which is coming from those closed era days, so they, in their aspiration to protect the national interest, they ended up creating white elephants, which practically did not work on ground. Over to you, sir.
Any trade deal, as is the lingo in today's world, or any trade agreement or pact, that is grounded a lot on the national interest of the country at that point of time, or the perceived national interest of the country at that point of time. If you look at India-Canada trade, it's not that trade is not happening. Trade is happening. A fresh agreement between the two countries can only embellish it and can only buoy it to a higher level. If you look at the beginning of the discussions and negotiations for a trade agreement between India and Canada, that was the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, CEPA, which was launched way back in late 2000s, 2009, 2010, around that time. And since then, it continued various sessions of negotiations, various rounds of negotiations, it could not reach a conclusion. Now, when a negotiation lasting for 5 to 6 years does not reach a conclusion, it means that both sides have got something to negotiate about, which they are not finding a solution agreeable enough for their national interest. So the first point I wanted to make here, Pratanda, is that both sides had their interests to safeguard, and unfortunately, those interests led to collision rather than convergence, and therefore the trade agreement was never reached. So then the two trade ministers, with the blessing of the then leadership of the two countries, they came up with an idea that, all right, we cannot do a comprehensive agreement. Can we do a less than comprehensive agreement? So they looked at the WTO template, and the WTO template also talks about the early harvest scheme. So they looked at the early harvest scheme, and that was called as the Early Trade Progress Agreement, EPTA. Early Progress Trade Agreement, I'm sorry. I just jumbled it up. So Early Progress Trade Agreement, and that was nothing more than the early harvest scheme, where they said that, all right, whatever we are convergent upon, let's pluck those fruits, codify them, put them together, and have a trade agreement while still trying to reach a comprehensive agreement. So that was the whole package. Now, the two, Prime Minister Carney visited. Before that, Prime Minister Modi was in Canada to attend the G7 Outreach Summit. And there, our Prime Minister mentioned that, look, now is the time that we should look at the comprehensive trade agreement once again. And when Prime Minister Carney came, he came to India with a few nuts and bolts, not all. And therefore, the two sides were able to agree in a joint statement to say that let's try to agree on a set of terms of reference and move towards finalizing a SEPA by the end of the year. Well, that's a very tall task, but the leadership should task us impossible so that we are able to deliver something. So both bureaucracies are involved in that. Both have to safeguard their national interests, and I will not only blame one bureaucracy or the other. So both have to take it forward in the interest of the national goals and objectives of the two countries, and also according to what their leaderships require them to do. So things are moving forward. Terms of reference have already been discussed and more or less frozen. The two delegations are talking to each other. So I hope that there will be forward movement in such trade negotiations. I've been a part of such trade negotiations in my own career. So a timeline is often set for bureaucrats to structure, but conclusion through that structure may not be as time-bound.
Sir, I can fully understand. I know that you will, of course, try to safeguard the Indian system from any much unsavory remarks. But the fact remains that I understand why Canada was not so interested. 80% of their trade was going to USA, 85%. So they barely had looked at it, India. That's the reality. In fact, they didn't look at even that way to China also. So that's different. But from our side, if we are a growing nation, if we have our ambitions, then we should be ready with what we want to do much in advance. That is what I understand. That when the opportunity comes, you strike the deal, right? Now, what I have noticed time and again, that we did some early harvest probably with Thailand. It ended up not in our favor, but in their favor. We had an agreement with ASEAN. Now we are crying with that, right? And after so much of persuasion, so much of high thinking, how to protect interests, the some nuts here, some bolts there, and then you end up doing nothing. How much have we come to terms? How efficient we are at this moment? Are we still living in those silos where diplomacy operates in its own, Ministry of Commerce goes by their own? There is no, even between, see, look, we are signing these trade pacts where investment should be a part, but it is not. You are looking at trade and investment as two different things. It is not. So what to you, sir? How much things have changed really?
Any trade agreement has to be technical. It cannot be just political. So both sides, the geopolitics side of the trade, which you are seeing in the Middle East, how much does it get disrupted? And the geoeconomics part of the trade, both have to be included. So therefore, there is a partnership between the political diplomats and, if I may call, commercial diplomats and economic diplomats. So they have to go together to reach an objective. That objective is given to them, not only through technical analysis, but also through political mandate. So the political mandate decides the objective, and the objective at this point in time, as far as Canada is concerned, is to reach a CEPA. So that is the political objective. Now, within that mandate, all the economic diplomats, all the commercial or trade diplomats, all the political diplomats will have to sit together, brainstorm, and come out with solutions which are win-win for both sides.
Right.
You mentioned about ASEAN trade agreements with India. You mentioned about even Sri Lanka. We don't talk about it so much. If you look at Japan, so everywhere we have not seen the trade increasing from India to those geographies as much as.
In fact, there has been a study. I remember I don't remember who did it. I mean, over the last 10 years only, that FTAs did not result into export growth.
So, I mean, I'm a proponent of something very different, which is not liked by most of the bureaucracies, but nevertheless, it's me and I will spill it out. I have never sort of kept my voice hidden. So my way of looking at trade agreements is that trade agreements should increase economic activities. Right. Exports is just a part of one of the economic activities. Just think of it. If Hong Kong was only looking at increasing trade in goods with the world, it would have never become what it is today.
Right.
If Singapore would have done the same, it would have never become what it is today in the world. If New York had only looked at it, Paris, London. So what I'm trying to say is that let's look at maximization of economic activities through a trade agreement. And I
economic activities that can lead to value creation. Economic activities that can lead to domestic value creation, isn't it?
I'll give you an example. So today we talk a lot about how India has become a hub, regional and in part global, for mobile phone manufacturing.
Right.
Now, let's look at it. If you look at our own ecosystem of mobile phone manufacturing, we are a part of the supply chain. We are not the entire supply chain.
Right.
And that is what is important, that you are adding value to the supply chain. You do not create and end the supply chain within your own geography. If you are able to do that, then you are able to say, yes, we have arrived in the modern trade. To give you an example, I won't name the company, but an automotive engine, a part of it would have traveled 48 times between Canada and US.
Right.
Till the last regime in US. 48 times to create a component which was made in US.
Right.
So what it did, that though the product export, whenever the data is compiled, will go to the US, but then it created a lot of value, jobs, industry in Canada itself. So that is the value addition I'm talking about. We have done it with Sri Lanka. We used to supply fabric to Sri Lanka, apparel being made in Sri Lanka, re-exported to India.
Right. Right.
That is the kind of synergy that you look at. And that is the place where a lot of brainstorming comes through the political diplomats, not only the technical trade and economic diplomats.
It needs comprehensive thinking. I mean, not in silos. Unfortunately, I don't know, but as an outsider, it seems that we tend to think in silos. So as you said, economic activity. So here, my wrap-up question. Canada is a huge source of investment. So we need investment. If we are to grow at double digit, if we have to become a developed country in 25 years, we need huge investment. So do you see, I mean, investment can be cross country. Indians, for example, you said about the Canada's lack of infrastructure. So Indian companies can go and do that. Now you tell me, what is the outlook? Has anything been done on that front after the Trudeau government?
If you look at the present Prime Minister in Canada, he had been a banker for larger part of his life. He had been an economic consultant for the larger part of his life. So therefore, he is a bridge builder. So is Prime Minister Modi. He also very much likes to build bridges. So if you look at these two personalities at the helms of the affairs at the moment, I'm sure that more bridges will be built, including in investment. So if you look at the investment, so far, Canada has invested in India and hugely through the portfolio investment.
Right.
So foreign portfolio investment coming into, which is no less important, let me tell you right away.
Obviously not.
Because if you don't have portfolio investment coming in, the manufacturing which follows those portfolio investment, expansion in particular, would also get sidelined. So today you are looking at, I'll give you the example. So when I was assigned to Canada, I joined there. The total investment, portfolio investment from Canada to India was close to about 73 billion Canadian dollars in India. When I left, despite of all the havoc which happened leading to my own coming back to India, we were still able to increase from $73 billion to $93 billion, $20 billion in 2 years.
That's remarkable.
Remarkable. And they did not heed to what the political ecosystem was trying to symbolize as the bilateral relation. So what I'm saying is that if the opportunity exists, traders are not political leaders. Investors are not political leaders. I don't want them to be political leaders, frankly.
Right, right.
So whenever you have the right market.
We have had enough of Mr. George Soros.
George Soros, of course. So whenever you have the right condition in the market, believe me, the investments will come unless you want to stop it. So when we found that the Chinese investment could hurt our sovereignty and our own effectiveness in the country, we stopped them. But as long as the market conditions are there and there is a free flow of investment in either direction, the market will take care of the investment itself.
Thanks, sir. I believe Canada is very important for us. I mean, the pension funds often common people may not know, but without these pension funds, your own infrastructure growth will be affected. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for being here. And before I end, here is one anecdote for the ambassador. I have been as a journalist for over 3.5 decades, so I have interacted with too many bureaucrats and diplomats. There is a small section of them who do not hold an ear, and so when I remember he was still then ambassador, and I WhatsApped, and quick came the response, and since then we keep on responding. And thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It's nice to see your kind of diplomats.